Hello, it is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024, and welcome again to Political Dharma with Alan Zundell. In my last episode, last week, I said that I was hoping to report on the Libertarian Party National Convention that happened this weekend, as well as Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s success in getting on the New York State ballot by Tuesday, which was the deadline. So I am going to report on those things, but I said I would have reported on Tuesday. Today is Wednesday. I'm glad I waited a day because there were new story developments of the aftermath of that Libertarian Convention that are relevant to Kennedy's chances of getting on the ballot in states, as well as getting in the presidential debates that were recently scheduled by the Trump and Biden campaigns in collusion. I don't hesitate to use that word, with CNN and ABC. So before I get to the Libertarian Convention and the aftermath, which is going to take the bulk of this show, I do want to do some updates on the Kennedy campaign and the Jill Stein campaign as well, since this show is devoted to the non-major party candidacies for the president, and I'm covering those who were most likely to have the top chance of getting any attention. That would include Jill Stein of the Green Party. So first up, let's talk about Kennedy and the presidential debates. Kennedy campaign yesterday sent a letter to the Federal Elections Commission filing a complaint against the Biden and Trump campaigns, as well as the cable news network, about how they set up the criteria for who gets to participate in the presidential debates and the presidential debate in June. I think it's June 27th. They said it was unfairly stacked. According to FEC rules, you have to have inclusion criteria that are objective and established before the fact. Now, the CNN did establish their criteria before the fact, but the Kennedy campaign is complaining that they are not objective. They are meant to keep Kennedy out of the campaign while allowing Biden and Trump to participate in that. So they filed a complaint. Now, what's going to happen with that, who knows? But I do not think that the FEC, which is composed equally of members of the Republican and Democratic parties, to try to get bipartisan but not multi-partisan support, is going to do much about it. But in the state of New York, Kennedy did announce that it got more than enough signatures to get on the ballot. It got 135,519 versus the 45,000 that was necessary to get on the ballot. So that's a little over 3 times more signatures than they actually needed, which is quite an achievement considering that in the state of New York, 4 years ago in 2020, they changed their ballot access rules to make it much harder for candidates to get on the ballot. For example, they changed the requirement of the number of signatures to get from 15,000 to 45,000 without giving any extra time, without changing the deadlines or the dates for when you can first file and the deadline for when you have to get all the signatures in. Same amount of time to collect 3 times as many signatures. Also, other requirements like you have to get, you can't get a party on the ballot ahead of time, which affects the Green Party. So I'll talk about those things in a minute when I get to Jill Stein. But the Kennedy campaign did say they were able to get on the ballot in New York, or at least they got enough signatures to be able to get on the ballot. And this cost them a phenomenal amount of money. They said it cost over $1 million to get the signatures they needed, paying an average of $90 an hour for signature gatherers, which is much higher than the usual going rate of about $30, $35. And Jill Stein's campaign said that because Kennedy was trying to get so many firms involved in gathering signatures for them in order to get that high number of signatures, they had a hard time. The Jill Stein campaign had a hard time finding firms to hire, so much harder time getting on the ballot. But they did announce that they were able to get, they think they get enough signatures as well. This photo is from Stein's Facebook page, and it shows them, I guess, in the one of the elections office in New York, turning in the signatures. I'm not sure exactly what it is. That's what it looks like to me, having done this myself, turned in signatures here in the state of Oregon for different causes. Anyway, the Stein campaign said they turned in enough signatures by the 5 o'clock deadline on Tuesday. They think to have gotten on the ballot, not nearly as many as the Kennedy campaign, but they think enough of a buffer that they will be able to get on the ballot in New York. Now, as the Green Party is not qualified party in the state of New York, the only way you can get qualified to be on the ballot as a political party is if in the previous gubernatorial or presidential election, your party got at least 2% of the vote, which is around, according to the 2020 vote, would have been about 172,000 votes. 2%, which is high for a minor party to get in a lot of states. So they raised the requirements for that as well. So because it's hard to get a minor party qualified for the ballot ahead of time, what they do is you have to file as an independent candidate, which Jill Stein is doing, and list a party if you want on your nomination. I'm sure she listed the Green Party. Then if she polls as a candidate for president at least 2% in New York, the Green Party will be on the ballot again in the next election cycle. So she's going to be the Green Party candidate there, and that means that the Green Party now has, as I estimate, and I haven't been keeping up the last few weeks because, as some of you know who followed the show, I have been away from my computer, not always able to devote time to this as much as I would like. What was I talking about just then? I wasn't able to track all the parties getting ballot access as closely. Didn't have my my little chart of how many they have. But I think the Green Party has about 22 states in which it has ballot access now. So I'll talk about that a little later, too, what kind of ballot access the various parties and candidates have. But I have a few more things about Jill Stein. Okay, so she thinks she got enough signatures to get on the ballot in the state of New York. They still have to have those verified by the state. But she also announced that in the state parties of the Green Party, in the various Green Party state parties, she has now gathered enough delegates to the National Convention, which I think is held in August, anyways, later this summer. They've gathered enough delegates to clinch the nomination for the Green Party. So Jill Stein will be the nominee of the Green Party, barring any very unexpected events. And then now we know who the candidates will be for the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, and the independent candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is also getting a lot of traction. So if we think about what are the, who are the candidates who are non-major party candidates that are most likely to make an impact on this presidential election, getting media attention or 1% or above of the vote or on more than a half dozen ballots, that would be the Kennedy campaign, the Libertarian Party, and the Green Party. So those are going to be the candidates that I'm going to follow most closely going into the future, unless there's a breakout in some other candidacy, such as Cornel West, who is polling fairly well, 1 or 2% in national polls. Nowhere near what Kennedy is getting, but on par with Stein, only he's having a harder time getting on the ballot as an independent candidate without a lot of financial resources. So it looks like the race for alternative candidates is starting to shape up. We know who the names are, and I'll be getting to the candidate of the Libertarian Party in just a moment. Anything else on that one, Green Party? I just wanted to say, all right, I have a map to show of where they have ballot access, in case you're wondering. And this shows, doesn't show New York yet, where she just got ballot access, because the Green Party actually does not have ballot access yet, just Jill Stein as an independent candidate, assuming that she can get those signatures all verified and she has enough qualified signatures to be on the ballot there. So Green Party has around 22 now, or Green Party plus Jill Stein, I should say, has about ballot access about 22 of these places. Okay, going back to the script here. Let's see what it is. That's okay. That's Jill Stein. The Libertarian Convention was held over the weekend just past, and it was as expected and as I predicted, very contentious. There were fights over, between the Mises Caucus, which 2 years ago, it gained control of all the national committee positions, not all of them, but the majority of them, and then it was able to get a lot of its delegates. A majority of the delegates going to the National Convention were aligned with the Mises Caucus, which seems to be related more closely to the MAGA-type Republicans, as I understand it now. Now, I'm not involved in the Libertarian Party, and I don't follow it really closely, except for the last couple of months because of the presidential election. The Libertarian candidate always gets more of a vote than the Green Party, for example. It's the biggest minor party in the United States. So I've been following this, and it seems like the Mises Caucus is economically conservative in the sense that they want free markets, free trade, all the kind of, how would I put it, the usual free market capitalist type of position on the economy. They want it very open and free of government regulation to the extent possible, but they're a little more socially conservative against things like abortion and gay rights and transgender treatments. This is how I understand it at this point. I'm not sure exactly what the distinctions they are making are, but it has to do with those types of positions. Its enemies often call it anti-woke. Take that for what it might mean. I don't know. But on the other side, there's more traditional type libertarians who are both economically conservative and also socially liberal, more open to, gay rights, abortion rights, all the rest, transgender rights. And I guess the classical Libertarian Caucus is the main faction opposing the Mises Caucus. Now, my word is not law here. I'm just getting secondhand reports from a variety of sources. And, of course, there's a lot of people in the middle who aren't really aligned with either of these and would be at the National Convention as delegates trying to decide, okay, which way are we going to go when it comes down to fights where we have a vote. So there were fights over things like the invitation of Donald Trump to be a speaker at the convention. The Mises Caucus folks were much more friendly to Trump being there, gave reasons why they thought it was good for the party. But then other folks were very unhappy with Trump being there, as we will see in a moment. Also over the presidential nomination of the party, the Mises Caucus was favoring the candidacy of Michael Richtenwald, whereas there were other candidates in the race who had high levels of support, but not the support level that Richtenwald had from the Mises Caucus. So there were going to be contention over that as well, and fights over credentialing, which delegates affiliated with who would actually pass the credentialing committee, which of course is going to determine the outcome of the other votes, right? Who gets credentialed. So fights over all these things. And the Friday where they were doing the credentialing, I guess, was quite contentious, and in some cases came down to yelled insults and maybe even people pushing each other, things of that nature. The outcome of all this was, to summarize, that the Mises Caucus won the vast majority of positions on the National Committee again. So they're going to be dominating the party going into the next 2 years. But they lost in the presidential nomination, which, as you probably know, was not Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They did not nominate him. But they nominated Chase Oliver, who is not affiliated with the Mises Caucus and is trying to do more to unify both factions and all factions of the party. But as we shall see, the Mises Caucus is not on board with that kind of reconciliation, apparently. So let's take a look at some of the things that did go on. I have a few short video clips from the convention. First of all, on Friday, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was invited to come and speak to them, he did come and speak, and he was well received. He got, as you'll see in this clip, he got some applause lines. He directed his speech very much to libertarian concerns, although he is the first to say he's not completely libertarian. He just shares a lot of their fundamental views. So he got applause that I thought was respectable, not real enthusiastic, but a pretty good reception overall, even though he came nowhere near capturing their nomination, not having pursued it very vigorously in the last few weeks, in fact saying he wasn't going to pursue it. Guess he changed his mind at the last minute. He welcomed it, but didn't win it. So let's hear what Kennedy had to say when he showed up for the Libertarian Convention play this.
It's the Bill of Rights that earned America the reputation as the land of liberty. The problem is the Bill of Rights is only a document. It doesn't have any magical powers to force government officials to respect it. And I'm sorry to say that again and again throughout our history, our leaders have failed to respect it. Again and again, they have cited some pretext to suspend and volunteer and violate our constitutional rights. There's always a reason why right now the rights are an inconvenience that we can't afford. It was the Red Scare in the 1920s. It was Joe McCarthy in the 1950s. It was civil rights protests and the Vietnam War protesters in the 1960s. It was the war on drugs in the 1970s. It was the war on terror after 2001. And most recently, it was the COVID pandemic. Maybe a brainworm ate that part of my memory. But I don't recall any part of the United States Constitution where there's an exemption for pandemics. And in fact, there's not one of the amendments of the Bill of Rights as a preamble that says, except when officials choose to declare a public health emergency. They all say very simply, the government shall not infringe on these rights no matter what. If the government can take them away at will, then they're not rights at all. They're really just privileges that are granted or revoked by an authority. Is that the kind of country that you want to live in? No. And every time they suspend rights and then pretend to give them back again, they establish a dangerous precedent. The rights they give back are never quite as strong as the ones that they took away. Oh, obviously, it's not the piece of paper called the Bill of Rights that protects our freedoms. We have to actually believe in it. Our leaders have to believe it with sufficient loyalty to counterbalance the temptations of power. And even more importantly, our citizens have to believe that their rights so loyally that they stand up for them, even when it means taking a personal risk. After all, the Constitution isn't just a legal document. It's also an inspirational document. And that's why, if you treasure your freedom, you better elect leaders who are inspired by it and who will wield it to inspire others. Leaders who believe in freedoms and hold the Bill of Rights in reverence.
That clip was pulled from the PBS NewsHour's coverage of his speech, as you could tell by the little logo in the bottom left corner there. And as you noticed by the type of applause he got, it was a warm welcome, I would say, but not wildly enthusiastic or anything like that. But Kennedy did do a good job, I think, of appealing to core libertarian beliefs, like personal freedom being the core libertarian belief. Let's contrast Kennedy's reception to that of Donald Trump, who made history by being the first major party candidate in about 100 years to address a minor party, the first former president to give a speech to a minor party's convention. I'm thinking back 1912, not that I was there, just thinking in historical terms. 1912, Theodore Roosevelt, the former president, was the nominee of the Progressive Party, which was formed for his candidacy. So he ran against the Republican Party. Anyway, that's just a reference point. It was a little different than now. So Trump made a little history here, but in more ways than one. First former president and possible future president to address a minor party convention, but not really terribly welcomed at that, I would say. So let's give a listen.
a great libertarian who may very well be in the room right now, I believe, but he's a great libertarian, D. Roy Murdoch, who I've become friends with through his writings in the American Spectator and numerous other places, wrote an article yesterday in which he mentions just some of the things that make me a libertarian without even trying to be one. That's nice. D. Roy wrote, Donald J. Trump will address the Libertarian Party at its national convention on Saturday. The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Thank you, D. Roy. Thank you. No, only do that if you want to win. If you want to lose, don't do that. Keep getting your 3% every 4 years.
I took that clip, as you could tell if you're watching this on video form, from C-SPAN's coverage of his speech. And as you could also tell, he was not warmly welcome like Kennedy was. He got boos and jeers from his very first appearance, and then he eventually, as in this clip, resorted to his customary sarcasm and hostility. Rather than directing it at the press, he started directing it at his audience. So his efforts to pander to the Libertarian Party by, emphasizing the areas where he thought he had correspondence with them didn't go over too well. And in the end, I think it was like both sides felt like it was not a successful venture into presidential politics, either on the part of the Libertarian Party or on the part of Donald Trump and his campaign. When it came to their presidential nomination, it took 7 rounds to choose a winner. I'm going to show you the first and then the 5th and 6th rounds before they got to the winner. Let's take a look first at the first ballot. Here, as you can tell, the Mises Caucus favorite Michael Rectenwald was far in the lead on the first ballot with 259 votes to the 181 of second place Chase Oliver. RFK Jr. was way down there near the bottom with only 19 votes from the delegates to the convention. And Trump had a half dozen votes as well in the first round. Wasn't really an official nominee as RFK was, but they were way down there, and they both got eliminated after the first ballot, along with a lot of other candidates as well. Now, by the time they had gone through several more ballots, eliminating candidates and coming closer to the end of this, as you see on the 5th ballot, which is down at the bottom of the screen if you're watching in video, Michael Rectenwald had 334 votes, which still kept him in the lead. Chase Oliver had 286, so he was still behind. And Mike Trematt, had 225 votes. Now, what happened was that the Oliver people made an offer to the Trematt people to make Trematt his vice presidential candidate. And as you see in the 6th ballot on the top part of the screen, their combined votes of about 200-something each came up to 423, putting them in the lead ahead of Rectenwald, who had only 382, barely more than on the 5th ballot. So in the 6th ballot, Chase Oliver took the lead by making a deal with Mike Trematt, and then he had to only go one more round, the 7th round, which was between Chase Oliver and none of the above, which would mean they weren't going to choose any candidate for their nomination. And the end result was that Chase Oliver did win the presidential nomination of the Libertarian Party. He was the Senate candidate of the Libertarian Party in Georgia in 2022, which he got about 3%, which led to a runoff between the Democrat and Republican candidates after the main election. That was a big news item because that Senate seat was going to determine the party balance in the U.S. Senate after the election. Chase Oliver is not aligned with the Mises Caucus, so that was a defeat for that caucus. He is more of, I would say, a traditional libertarian, and had quite a bit of support from the outset, but not as much as he needed to win in the early rounds until he finally made a deal and got in the second round. I mean, in the seventh round, finally made it to be the candidate that was chosen. Let's hear a little bit about his speech. Now, this speech he gave not after the nomination, but before it, and I want you to notice the young woman standing on the left side of the screen, because she was his original vice presidential pick, and he abandoned her in order to make that deal with, what was the name, Mike Termat, in order to win the nomination. I'm not sure how she felt about that, but that's what happened. So let's hear a little bit about Oliver. Let me precede this, though, by saying there was concern expressed in that Political article from some libertarians that this meant they're going to lose ballot access in a lot of states, because not only is Chase Oliver not very well known nationally, his only claim to fame was that he, served as the so-called spoiler in that Georgia election 2 years ago, but he's an experienced campaigner now. He actually ran for a high-level office and comported himself, as far as I hear, fairly well as a candidate. But they were worried because without a famous name and without the support of all of the party, the Mises Caucus having been disappointed in who the nominee was, and as we shall see, that disappointment remains, he may not be able to unify the party to get the level of vote they need to retain ballot access in a lot of states. So that is a real worry. Now, I'm not sure that that's entirely true, because there is a way that Oliver can pick up votes that are not going to go to Kennedy or Trump or Biden. Let me insert here that one of the worries the Libertarian expressed was not only that Oliver is not well known nationally, but that as a protest candidate, Kennedy is probably going to pick up a lot of those votes of people that might otherwise turn to the Libertarian Party as, I don't want to vote for either major party, so I'm going to vote for somebody who, in other cases, it might have been the Libertarian Party, but this year, many more people are probably going to go over to Kennedy, which is another blow for the Libertarians. More on that in a minute. So let's hear a little bit from Chase Oliver and what he said in his speech. Again, his former vice presidential candidate is standing by his side there, loyally, only to be abandoned a little later, but got him the nomination.
And how are we going to reach out to the next generation of liberty? We're going to do it by opposing the warfare state at home and abroad. If you were in the hall last night, you saw that I have zero love for the war criminal Donald Trump or any of his wars that he continued. But I want to make one thing clear. I'm keeping plenty of my powder dry to throw ammo right at Joseph R. Biden, his war criminal ways, and his proxy wars, and his warfare state all over the world. So I want to speak loud and clear to the millions of students right now who are protesting the warfare state in their college campuses all over the country. If I am the nominee, there will be a young person on the stage, and the only person on the stage, that says, end the genocide, ceasefire now, and end the war machine.
As you can see, he's highlighting his anti-war credentials, which was how I think he got into politics in the first place, and emphasizing Israel's attacks on Gaza and the war they're having with Hamas over there in the Middle East. That's a way to pick up a lot of young voters who are disillusioned with the major parties, as well as with Kennedy, who is also supportive of Israel despite his anti-war positions on Ukraine and other places. So younger people, younger voters who are and there's not just young people, but older people as well, who hold this Israeli issue very high on their list of priorities because of the extent of damage and the involvement of the U.S., the extensive involvement in the U.S. and what's going on there, are looking for a candidate that is going to represent that position. So a lot of people are going to be turning not only against the major party candidates, but against Kennedy as a possibility. And if they're looking toward the right, they might find Jill Stein or Cornel West. But if they, look towards the left, they will find Jill Stein and Cornel West. But if they're looking a little more towards the right, they would find Chase Oliver, probably a good candidate. So he may pick up votes that way, even though his party is divided and he's not well known. We'll see. It's a very unusual race. But having chosen Chase Oliver, that doesn't mean that the Mises Caucus was ready to go forward. Now, as I said, the Mises Caucus got the vast majority of positions on their national committee once again, and Angela McArdle, the chair of the party, won re-election to her office, but on her X post, which used to be Twitter, just a day or two ago, she's had something to say about this, advising other libertarians. Let's put this up so you can see it. She says, everyone is understandably flipping out right now. I'll have more to say this weekend, but for now I'll say I delivered an incredible convention, blah, blah, blah. All my critics were wrong. I made the right call to invite Donald Trump. And if libertarians can behave themselves, he will free Ross Ulbricht and put one of us in his cabinet. Now, those are things that Trump talked about in his speech. Ross Ulbricht was the creator of Silk Road, an online trading place, which ended up hosting a lot of illegal trades and things like drugs and sex trafficking and etc. He ended up being convicted and sent to prison for 2 consecutive life terms for 40 years. Now that seems a little excessive. You got to live 2 lifetimes, plus they're going to add on 40 years. It seems kind of absurd when you think about that. One life term would be sufficient if there weren't things like pardons and paroles and the rest. But he said he would free that, and also he would bring some libertarian into his team if he wins the election. So Trump was making these promises, and McArdle apparently thinks that it's still important to make a deal with Trump of some kind. What that means exactly is not clear, and in fact, one of the other members of the Libertarian Party, this is Karlin Borisenko. She was the New Hampshire gubernatorial candidate of the Libertarian Party in 2022. She asked McArdle, well, what exactly do you mean about that? She asking, as you can see here, this is from an article in the Independent Political Report by Jordan Willow Evans, who's been doing a terrific job in that publication of covering the Libertarian Party's convention and pre-convention and post-convention activities. Borishenko is asking McArdle if she's going to endorse Chase Oliver and commit to voting for him, and asking for a simple yes or no, and McArdle simply responds, when I'm ready. So apparently she is not ready yet to sign on to the Oliver candidacy. Going to go her own way and advising the members of her caucus to go their own way as well, apparently towards Donald Trump rather than their own candidate. Not sure how that's going to play out. But even more important, the day after that, I think it was just today or maybe yesterday, Libertarians for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., there is such a group, they had a statement to make as well. Let's get you up the story here first. Again, in the Independent Political Report by Jordan Willow Evans, Libertarians for Kennedy, they proposed a co-nomination strategy, making a deal with the Kennedy campaign to get them on the ballot in the Libertarian ballot line in some states in order to help them get ballot access to get in the debates, and also to help the Libertarian Party maintain its ballot access for the future by getting a sufficient percentage of the vote in those particular states where they might be in danger. Here is the statement of the Libertarians for Kennedy, and the highlighting is from me. Whenever you see the yellow highlighting there, it's usually from me. They're saying if the Chase for Media campaign, the Chase for Media, now I don't have my glasses on, the Chase Termott, that is Oliver Chase and Mike Termott, if they agree and the state parties agree, the rules of the party would allow them to co-nominate Kennedy Shanahan. Now, I assume that doesn't mean they're going to run both candidates in the same state, Oliver and Kennedy. I assume it means they'll run Chase in some states and Kennedy in other states if this agreement can take place. So there were states where people high up who were for Kennedy, like the delegation, the state delegation chair, or people high up in the state party hierarchy that were not necessarily affiliated with the Mises Caucus, wanted Kennedy instead. So they're looking to somehow help Kennedy get on the ballot as the Libertarian Party candidate in some states so that he would have an official ballot status in order to help him get in the presidential debates. Now, it'd be hard for CNN to keep him off if he has official ballot status by a political party when Biden and Trump don't even yet have that. They're not yet their official nominees of the party, whereas Kennedy is the official nominee in some parties, and if the Libertarians put him on a lot of ballots, he will be on the ballot as the official nominee of parties enough to get that hypothetical majority in the Electoral College, which would allow him into the debates. All he needs is one more poll giving him 15% or better of voters' preference. And on the other side, they're saying that he can help them keep ballot access in all the states that are in danger of losing it if the Oliver campaign does not perform as well as they would like to, or at least as well as they would need to keep their ballot access in those states. Whether or not this comes through, who knows, but it is keeping the story alive of the Libertarian Party's possible helping of the Kennedy campaign, which I thought was, okay, now the Libertarian Party convention is over and Kennedy didn't get the nomination, so that chapter is closed. Seems like that chapter is not quite closed yet, that maybe they'll make a deal that can help both the party and the Kennedy campaign, as I thought would be sensible, and do this in defiance of the Mises Caucus that seems to be leaning towards Trump rather than Oliver. Not sure how the Oliver campaign is going to take all this. I don't know. I would speculate they're probably not going to take the deal, but who knows? Still makes things interesting, right? That's about it for this show. One last thing, speaking of access in the presidential debates and the Biden campaign, they were not able to get on the ballot in Ohio because they scheduled their national convention later than the deadline for getting ballot access. So when they couldn't get the state legislature to do anything about it, the Biden campaign was able to get the Democratic National Committee, not too hard a lift, I guess, to schedule a virtual nomination as they had during the pandemic 4 years ago, which would mean that they get together delegates in the various states and have some kind of online convention or online voting process, choose Biden, and then go on to have their convention kind of as a kickoff for the campaign and all the usual rah-rah-rah stuff for their candidate. But that's how they're going to try to get him on the ballot in that state. So this puts us now in a position where the Republicans have ballot access in 50 states plus the District of Columbia, so that makes 51. The Democrats in 49 states plus the District of Columbia, and probably Ohio if this gambit works, which it should. Libertarian, about 39 states. Green Party, about 22 states. RFK in 17 states now. Let me amend that. Only RFK's ballot status is kind of complicated here because there are about 7 states where he has guaranteed ballot access. I think I've referred to this a couple times now, which means that either the state has already certified the signatures he needs to be on the ballot, or a political party that's qualified for the ballot has nominated him officially as their candidate. So he's got 7 states that only give him 129 electoral votes, which is important only for how CNN decides to count the the possibility of them getting a majority in the Electoral College, how they count, where they have ballot status. If you count all the states where he has enough signatures to get on the ballot, it would be about 15 states. Now, this is without Nevada and Florida for reasons that I'll mention in a minute. And would give him, what, about, let me see here, 223 votes without Nevada and Florida, which is much closer to the Electoral College majority need of 270. Now, the problem with Florida was that he was the nominee of a minor party that has not yet gained its ballot access back because it failed to file an audit a couple years ago. But they've applied to regain ballot access, and they probably will get it. I don't really know, but it seems like it's a good possibility. So if they get ballot access, Kennedy will be on the ballot in Florida, which would bring his total of electoral votes, potential electoral votes, up to 253. And then in Nevada, he did get enough signatures, or at least his campaign says he did, but the Nevada Elections Bureau said, well, you didn't put your vice presidential candidate on the ballot, even though they told him he didn't have to, but it's in the law. He has to have a vice presidential candidate. He hadn't picked Nicole Shanahan yet, so that's questionable. But if he's successful in a lawsuit or whatever he's doing to try to get on the ballot in Nevada, that would bring it up to 259 Electoral College votes. So if you think of him as having potential ballot access by having enough met the requirements to get on the ballot in all these states without already having the states certify that, just like you're presuming Trump and Biden will be their party's nominees, all those states would bring it up to 259, which is just 11 short of the 270 he would need. So a lot depends upon how CNN is going to count these things and whether the libertarians in various states are willing to go along with this proposed deal to put Kennedy on the ballot in some states. Keeps things interesting. I don't know what else to say, but if you find it interesting, you want to keep following the coverage with me here on Political Dharma, do like, share, and subscribe this. And I'm trying to put up the subscribe button there and also keep my face in the picture at the same time. How about that? No, it disappeared. I'm not too successful in that one. So like, share, subscribe. Always appreciate your comments, interesting things. You sometimes correct me when I'm wrong or give me information I didn't have. Really appreciate that, and the compliments you've all given me. I guess that's about it for this week. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but within the week, especially as things happen by the weekend, I'll probably put together a show again then. Again, if you want to help the show keep going financially, you can make a donation. Go to politicaldharma.com and hit the big button, and any amount is welcome. Thank you very much, and see you later. Okay, bye.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus, the moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.